Part 173. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1721. Manbao helped Bai Shan's men to get out of the car, and walked to the front with the medicine box. Her father didn't even look at her, she couldn't help shouting, "Father, I'm back." Only then did the old Zhou take his eyes away from those things, and grabbed Manbao's hand happily. "Manbao, are these all given to you by your majesty?" "No, the prince rewarded me." The emperor was stingy now, and Manbao said, "His royal highness has given birth to a son, and you will reward me when you are happy." "Well born, if his royal highness has a son every year." "Manbao, father, if the prince hears your words, he will be happy." "The prince lacks everything except his son." The father and daughter stood together in the yard to watch them move everything down. Manbao pointed to the exquisite china and Lejun said, "You don't need to send it to the warehouse. You can send it to which room you need." Lejun responded, wrote down all the things he sent, and then began to instruct his brothers and sisters to move in. Zhou Lixiu said while moving, "Being an imperial physician makes a lot of money. Third sister, you will also be an imperial physician in the future. I wonder if I can become an imperial physician instead of studying." Zhou Liru proudly said, "The imperial doctor said that you can be a good candidate. My aunt must have seen that you have no talent before letting you study. You should study honestly." Old Zhutu hadn't seen Manbao for a long time, and he missed her quite a bit, so he pulled her to warm up. Manbao was still thinking about going to the garden to roast venison, so he told her father, "I'm dressed warmly and eating well, father, don't worry." "By the way, where's Bai Er?" Bai Er went out to play with his friends early in the morning. He was worried about not going out yesterday, let alone going to the roast deer feast at the horse farm in the western suburbs. It was not until yesterday evening that Yin Or sent someone to say that the princess had given birth safely, and he was happy to invite his friends to go to the western suburbs again. Racecourse. Bai Shan knew it from Daji when he brought the things back to the yard, so when he saw his grandmother and mother, he would take Manbao to gather the number of people, and it was not too late now. Mrs. Lu didn't stop them either. The children had to stay in the palace for 8 days in a 10-day period. After leaving the palace, they naturally had to relax. She asked Madame Lu and Madame Zheng to take out the new cloak made this year, and tied an inky black one for Bai Shan herself. She patted it and smiled and said, "I think this year may be colder than last year, so someone made you a cloak out of black duck feathers, and now the snow has just stopped outside, it's cold, put on something warmer." Bai Shan reached out and touched the cloak, only to feel that the fabric in his hand and the outer layer of fur were very soft, so he asked with a smile, "How many black ducks did it take to get such a cloak?" "Grandma, grandson is in good health." "Well, you don't have to spend so much money." Mrs. Lu smiled and said, "They are all ducks raised at home. They were all killed for pickling in the fall. What is the value of their own things? This is just to deceive outsiders." Bai Shan has been managing Zhuangzi since he was a child, and he has long known that chicken feathers and duck feathers can be kept as quilts and other things. Those things are very valuable, and their family is considered rich, but only the grandmother and mother use the quilt filled with duck feathers. And the duck feathers on this cloak are still very thin on the neck, such a large cloak. However, Bai Shan still accepted it and said, "Grandma, don't make such expensive clothes next time." Mrs. Lu smiled and said okay, then gave him another cloak and said with a smile, "This is made for Manbao, it is made of white duck fur, which is warmer than the fox fur she wore before, take it now." Bai Shan secretly said in his heart, "It seems that the ducks they raised have suffered a serious crime this year." He grabbed the cape and ran to find Manbao. Manbao just sent her father out of the hospital and asked him to take a look at the gift from the prince. She was hesitating whether she wanted to go to Bai Er and the others to play with, when she saw Bai Shan running over and pulling her away. "Go out, go, let's find Bai Er and the others to eat venison. Man Bao immediately became happy and ran out hand in hand with him. Aren't we baking in the garden at home? There is no venison for sale outside. If you want to buy it, you have to ask Yin or Lu Huan for help. It's not worth the trouble of going back and forth. Let's go to the Zijiao racecourse and find them directly. When they arrived at the front yard, Daji, who knew the news in advance, had already prepared their horses. Bai Shan put the cloak in her hand on her, smiled and said, "This one is even better than that white fox fur." Man Bao reached out and touched it, exclaiming, "It's so soft, what kind of hair is this?" "Duck feathers." Bai Shan pulled the thief over and said to her, "Let's go." Only then did Man Bao regain his senses. After he pulled Qi Ji and mounted his horse, he realized that the cloak on his body was a bit like hers, only a white one and a black one. Man Bao smiled and asked, "The cloak on your body is also made of duck feathers?" "Yes." "How many ducks does it cost?" The two people's focus was surprisingly the same. Bai Shan smiled and said, "This year, my family smoked a lot of ducks and marinated some of them. When we come back and have some sent over, we can try various ways to eat them." Man Bao's eyes suddenly lit up, and he nodded again and again, "Okay, okay." The two went out on horseback, and only ran for a while. They happened to meet Shai Zilang and Xiang Mingxiu returning from outside. Shai Rulang only had time to raise his hand, and Man Bao and the others ran past them. She just turned around and shouted at them, "Fourth brother, we went out to play, see you in the evening." The snow foam raised by the horse's hoof almost fell on Shiro's face. He waved his hand in front of him and could only watch them run away. Xiang Mingxiu smiled and said to Thursday Lang, "I'm still a child after all, and I still want to play, but it seems that the palace is very safe." Thursday Lang didn't think so much. Didn't the young master of the Yin family send someone over last night to say that the crown princess and her son are safe? Xiang Mingxiu smiled, "How could such a thing be certain? It is common for children at the age of 7 or 8 to die, let alone a newborn baby and a mother who has just given birth." When Man Bao and Bai Shan ran to the racecourse in the western suburbs, Bai Cheng and the others shouted and roasted something. Lu Huan called friends and called a lot of people. They directly took up a large section of the corridor. Yin probably couldn't eat these things, so he sat on the edge of a brazier and cooked a fire, and watched them make a fuss. He turned around and saw two people, black and white, with 3 guards running away. When he came over, he narrowed his eyes and took a serious look. After a while, he smiled and said, "Bai Shan and the others are here." Everyone turned their heads and saw that it was true, and immediately waved their hands happily. "You guys are really timely, we just ordered things to start. Nyo, the first piece of roasted venison hasn't been sliced yet." Man Bao had already smelled the fragrance. She threw the horse to Daji, turned and ran into the corridor, looked at it seriously and asked, "Is this a deer that was killed?" Not only were they killed now, but they were also caught now. Zhao Liaolang said proudly, "I brought people to hunt, isn't it amazing?" Lu Huan smiled and said, "This deer was raised in captivity on a horse farm. There are so many deer that they can't run away. It's not easy to hunt them." "Easy? Why you didn't hunt one?" Zhao Liaolang said, "In terms of riding and archery, you really can't compare to me." "That's because you're old. See you at 4 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl." Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1722. Zhao Liaolang was so angry that he gave Lu Huan a kick, and everyone started frolic. Feng Zonping took a knife and cut a piece of meat and put it on a plate and gave it to Zhou Man. Then he looked at Zhao Liaolang, "Come on, you are a hero today, say you which one do you want?" Zhao Liaolang grabbed the knife and cut it himself, sprinkled a handful of salt on it, took a bite, and said with bright eyes, "Yes, the meat you hunted is delicious." Feng Zonping turned around and pulled out another knife, and everyone gathered to start. Man Bao eats ready-made, nodding slightly, it is indeed delicious. After taking a bite, Zhao Liaolang asked, is the little emperor and grandson safe and sound? Man Bao nodded, very good. Zhao Liaolang exhaled, last night, my father was so happy to open 2 jars of wine, and he didn't even care about the 20 taels of silver I paid from the cashier this morning. Bai Erlang thought of something, looked over from behind the hanging deer leg, and said, you still owe me 5 taels. I know, isn't this just to pay back your money to the family? Bai Shan was very curious, how can you spend so much money? Zhao Liaolang sighed and said, it's not that I can spend money, it's that you haven't got a family yet, so there are few places to spend money. When you have wives and children like me, you'll know how much money is spent. Feng Zongping said with a smile, don't listen to his nonsense, his daughter-in-law has her own dowry, and you occasionally spend your daughter-in-law's dowry, don't think we don't know. If I don't buy them something, will my daughter-in-law give me the dowry? Zhao Liaolang sighed, but you're right, it's really shameful to spend your daughter-in-law's money, so I didn't borrow it from Bai Er. After that, he looked at Bai Cheng and Bai Shan, shook his head and said, speaking of which, your family is really good enough. The family will take care of your property while you are still studying. Like me, I have become my own children, but as long as I'm still studying for a day, these things at home will not be my turn, and I can only get it from the accountant. Man Bao was curious as he ate, you are the son of a powerful man, how can you still be short of money? Who said that the rich and powerful children are not short of money? He is still an aristocratic family, you ask him, is his family short of money? Zhao Liaolang pointed at Bai Shandao. After thinking about it, Bai Shan said, my family is not short of money, but it is not rich either. Zhao Liaolang sneered, that's because you are the only one in your family, and you have 6 like mine, how much money is enough? He glanced at the dreadlocks on the 2 of them and pointed, it's like this one on your body, it's made of fine fluff from the necks of ducks, right? I don't know how many ducks it takes to make this. One piece of clothing can buy a small house. If my family buys one for me, it will have to buy a similar amount for the top 5 brothers, otherwise it will be favored over the other. What happened to my eldest brother and the others for the house in Kongai Yuanfang? In the end, my father got angry and gave it to His Royal Highness, the clothes and other things. If you give it to you, you will make trouble, then simply don't give it to anyone. Each room can only draw a certain amount of money from the account every month, and if it exceeds, you will find a way. Zhao Liaolang said sadly, my brothers are all I'm on a business trip, anyway, there are some subsidies, what do I have? If you want to stay decent, you have to buy a horse, someone treats you to a drink, you have to go home for a meal, someone else wears new clothes, and he has to get a fashionable outfit. If he is still alone as before, the money will be enough, not to mention the secret subsidies from his parents, but now that he is married, it is obviously not enough. In the eyes of his parents, when the child becomes a father, it is natural for their daughter-in-law to worry about this kind of thing, and they don't care at all. So Zhao Liaolang's money is always not enough to spend. Man Bao and the others listened with relish and shook their heads, thinking that he was too good-faced and stubborn. Bai Shan and the others are not important, even Feng Zongping and Yi Ziang can't understand it. Seeing their disapproval, Zhao Liaolang shook his head and said, you guys, you're still too young, just wait. When you get married, you'll know how much I can't help myself. Man Bao took the knife in his hand and ate the meat by himself. She said, you can ride a horse and parade through the streets, get drunk in Hualu, and hunt roast venison in the horse farm in the western suburbs. Bai Shan nodded, pointing to the snowflakes that were rising again outside and said, in such a day, there is no charcoal, and even the house leaks and collapses, and there is no place to shelter people who can't help themselves. Man Bao remembered something, turned his head and glanced at the white snow outside, and said, although the snow may cause disasters, it is good for the wheat in the ground. The snow will be swept away in the next year. It should be a good thing to ease the drought, right? Yin, he said, when I went out this morning, my grandmother had already asked some of my sisters to come to the house. It seems to be for the purpose of opening a porridge shed. Would you like to join us? After thinking for a while, Man Bao said, I have a lot of dolomites at home. I'll go back and ship an extra car for you. Remember to write down my name. Before Yin Or could speak, Bai Shan had already turned his head and said, let's go back and ask grandmother. Maybe grandmother wants to open a porridge shed this year? At that time, our two porridge sheds can be placed side by side. The last sentence was spoken to Yin Or. Yin Or thought about it. Bai Shan is currently studying in the Chongquen Museum, and he will definitely become an official in the next 2 years. The Bai family is an aristocratic family, and he must start to build momentum for him. Then go back first to discuss. Bai Erlang said, then I'll go back and ask my elder brother, but our family doesn't have a village here, so we have to buy rice. Man Bao said generously, the rice outside is expensive, I will sell it to you, I have Lumi. Bai Erlang, I know. Zhao Liaolang felt that they were worrying a lot, but he also began to think about it. If he wanted to mention this to his mother when he went back, he should be a part of it. He didn't know that Zhao Qiagong's family was the first family in the capital to set up a porridge shed, and they not only stated that they were providing relief to the victims and praying for their families, but also praying for the newly born little emperor's grandson. Even the emperor was very happy, and even called Li Shangshu's few subordinates who played well into the palace to drink together. He also planned to open a granary for disaster relief, just to pray for the little emperor's grandson. Then Lu Shangshu refused. Your Majesty, the snow looks big now, but it may not last for a few days. Even if it really becomes a snow disaster, this is not the time for disaster relief. Li Shangshu also said, yes, if your Majesty is really happy, why don't you go to Huguo Temple to donate some sesame oil money and ask them to pray for the little emperor's grandson. See you at 9. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1723. It is said that it is donated to Huguo Temple sesame oil money, but in fact, it is to give the money to Huguo Temple, and let Huguo Temple open a porridge shed for disaster relief, which is an alternative prayer for the little grandson. The emperor was heartbroken and began to plan this matter. Lu Shangshu glanced at Li Shangshu vaguely. Since it was an activity of donating sesame oil by the emperor, it was not the treasury who paid for it, but the emperor himself. The emperor had obviously not thought of this at this time. It is not so easy for the emperor to travel. It is past noon now, and it is impossible to leave the palace. Tomorrow is the little emperor's grandson's Zazen, so the emperor decided to discuss this matter after tomorrow. After Manbao and the others had eaten and drank at the horse farm in the western suburbs, they pooled together the money to pay for the roasted deer feast, and then rode on horses and ran home after chasing me. That's right, although Zhao Liaolang hunted the deer, he still had to pay for it. After all, it was a deer raised on a horse farm, right? Everyone shared the expenses equally, which was one of the reasons why Zhao Liaolang gradually moved away from his former friends and liked to hang out with them. Every time you go out, you no longer pay, or I pay, and it is directly shared. No matter how much you eat, it is enough to pay tens or hundreds of dollars per person. A lot less constraints and troubles. The group was very happy. You chased me into the city gate, and when they got to the inner city, they separated and went back to their own homes. Bai Shan jumped off the horse and dragged Man Bao and Bai Er to Mrs. Lu to discuss opening a porridge shed. Mrs. Lu smiled and said, It's hard for you to think of this, it's hard for the people in Gyeonggi this year, so the snow didn't stop last night. I sent people to Zhuangzi to transport food early in the morning, and they should be back tomorrow at the latest. Now, when the time comes, our family will build a porridge shed in the outer city. When Man Bao heard this, he contributed a carload of food instead of the family, and then looked at Bai Er. Bai Er touched her body, and found out one or two of the silver coins she had just recovered today and gave it to her. There's not much more. Man Bao was amazed. You're very rich, you can buy 10 stone millet. Man Bao received the money, waved his hand and said, I'll go tell my father in a moment, and call you 10 stone millet. The old man from Zhou was sitting at home, the money came from the sky, and he was very happy when he got the money. While asking his sons to weigh millet, he said, Man Bao, this grain can't be sold indiscriminately. Now we have a lot of family and land. The harvest won't come until next year, so you have to keep a little bit of it, you know. There's Lumi every month. Man Bao asked Chai Lang to move a little more and told her father, our family also provides 10 shi of food, and together with Bai Shan and the others, we will open a porridge shed. Old Zhou Yu opened his mouth wide and asked, why? After thinking about it, Man Bao said, in order to make it easier for me to become an official in the future, let's earn more salaries and rewards. The old Zhutu turned his eyes and said, I know, I just want his son to be the lily chief, and let his son run around in various villages to do some good things first to gain a good reputation. Man Bao was taken aback for a moment. That's right, but Li Chang wants to give the position to Dayat and her father-in-law. That's what the lieutenant colonel said before I went out, saying that the position would be passed on to the eldest of his family after 3 or 2 years. Although it seems to be closer to the in-laws, the old Zhutu is still more used to the old chief. Since this food was for Man Bao to be promoted in the future, then Lao Zhou turned one eye and closed one eye and let them move. It's just that after the move, my heart still hurts, and I feel that the price of being an official is indeed a lot. Not only can my daughter return home once every 7 or 8 days, but she has to dig out food. Seeing that his father agreed, Man Bao felt relieved to hand over the matter to Mrs. Liu, and then turned around and went shopping to buy a longevity lock. Even Bai Shan bought a piece. Anyway, I saw the birth of the little emperor, so why should I buy him a piece? The two of them couldn't give gifts that were too big or too special, so they locked up the longevity locks and went home. Entering the palace the next day, Man Bao and Bai Shan both received invitations to watch the ceremony. The little emperor's grandson Zizan, the princess mother and several sisters-in-law all came to the palace, and the emperor and the queen came to see it in person. This was the first time for a grandson. Before the birth of King Gong's eldest son, the emperor was not able to go out to see the child. He didn't see the child until the child's full moon. As soon as Man Bao and Bai Shan entered the door, they saw so many people in the palace, all of whom were big bosses, and stood silently aside. Everyone surrounded the children, and no one noticed them coming. When the auspicious time arrived, one of the two stable mothers hugged the child, and the other brought up a basin of clear water. After they prayed, they quickly opened the swaddle with their hands and feet, held the child and let the child's feet touch the cold water. The child immediately cried as soon as it was exposed to the air. Because they received a generous gift from the crown princess in advance, the mother-in-laws quickly and gently sprinkled water on the little emperor's grandson. Don't look at the amount of water that the stable mothers raised, but not much fell on the child, and the speed was so fast that it ended without everyone recovering, but the child was crying loudly, and the tears were dripping with eyes closed. Big drops fall. Man Bao frowned and whispered to Bai Shan, I really don't know why you must wash with clean water. I heard that outside, rich people still throw all kinds of things into the basin, so the rules in the palace are not good. Throw things into the basin, otherwise the things will carry dirty things and come into contact with the child, and the child will easily get sick. Bai Shan, I did the same thing when I was young. You only knew in 3 days. My mother and grandmother told me. Bai Shan glanced at her, but I remember, your family and the people in our village seem to seldom wash 3 times. Who said that? We wash it ourselves at home, he. The hot water used should be used for bathing a child, Man Bao said. My mother said, my aunt and aunt have to go to wash the 3rd time, it's too troublesome, and I have to give a gift to Mrs. Wen, it's not worth it, so I washed it with a pot of hot water at home. Zhao Liaolang, who was squeezed beside them, turned his head and glanced at them when he heard it, and said in a low voice, can this be called Shizan? Man Bao was startled, looked up and saw him and asked, why are you here? Zhao Liaolang said angrily, how rare, this is my cousin's eldest son, my parents are here, what's wrong with me coming along to give gifts? It's you, why are you here? Man Bao said, how rare, I delivered the child, I came to see the child, what's wrong with giving gifts along the way? Zhao Liaolang looked at Bai Shan. Bai Shan smiled and said, I also witnessed the birth of the little emperor's grandson, so His Royal Highness invited me to come and watch the ceremony. When they were talking, the nanny had already coaxed the child, and then everyone began to praise the child. What a loud voice, it sounds like a healthy and smart one. It's understandable that crying is associated with physical health, but why can it be associated with being smart? See you tomorrow, I have to adjust my schedule tonight, I have to go to bed early. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1724. Man Bao and Bai Shan waited for them to give gifts, so they went up to take out the longevity lock they bought and gave it to the little grandson. It is a very ordinary lock, and it is estimated that he will never wear it in his entire life, because his grandmother gave it to him. The one cent is much nicer. When the emperor saw Zhou Man, he remembered it and said with a smile, speaking of which, you have a longevity lock, like the old 5th. Man Bao was at a loss, pulled out the longevity lock from her neck and asked, this? The emperor recognized the same as the 5th one at a glance, and nodded with a smile, yes, it was sent by the 5th one's foreign family, it seems that it was made by a silversmith from Shangzhou. The 5th prince squeezed up from behind, glanced at it, and nodded, it's the same piece as mine. The emperor smiled and asked, where's your piece? The 5th prince smiled embarrassedly, father, I am too old to wear the longevity lock. You were not in good health when you were born. Your grandfather worked so hard to call you back to pray for blessings. You see Zhou Man wearing it all the time. Having said this, the emperor looked at Bai Shan behind her and suddenly smiled. If you hadn't made an appointment with Bai Shan early, it would be very appropriate that you have this relationship with the 5th. Man Bao raised his head and glanced at the 5th prince, just when he saw the acne on his face, and felt a little disgusted in his heart, but what the 5th prince was thinking about was that she had made Mr. Wang dizzy at the top, and last year she sued him. The imperial state was so daring, she couldn't help shaking her head and taking a step back. Bai Shan stepped forward and stood beside Zhou Man, and reached out to hold hers. The emperor laughed when he saw it, but when he turned his head, he glared at the 5th prince, what a worthless kid. Everyone was busy watching Wash San, and then the emperor gave a banquet in the East Palace. Except for Zhou Man and Bai Shan, the rest were members of the emperor's family, the emperor's daughter-in-law's family and the emperor's daughter-in-law's family. The emperor naturally sat down with his eldest brother-in-law and his in-laws, and when he saw Zhou Man, he simply waved to her and called her. Because she is also a servant. King and minister are suitable. Because the emperor had a criminal record, Bai Shan sat down together cheekily, to prevent him from saying anything like kissing. Zhao Liaolang and the others watched as Bai Shan and Zhou Man stepped forward to sit with their father and brother. Ping Bai was a generation taller than them. Of course, it wasn't that he couldn't eat anymore. The emperor talked while eating. After commenting on the dishes, he mentioned that he and the queen planned to go to Hyogyo Temple to offer incense in 2 days, and donate some sesame oil money for the little emperor's grandson. He hoped that Duke Zhao and Duke Pai could speak for him. Going out with the queen at one time, it is not a microservice, it is impossible to sneak, so it must be approved by the ministers, especially the Jingzhou house. Today, both Zhao Qiuagong and Pai Qiuagong are very happy, so they are full of praise. Man Bao was puzzled. Your Majesty, I think it's a gloomy day, and it looks like it's going to snow. It's better to donate sesame oil than to donate food to the common people. The emperor said, I just asked Hyogyo Temple to do this. Man Bao felt that it was too much trouble, and Deoxu and the others had said that the sesame oil money donated by the virtuous people at the bottom of the mountain should be reserved for their own food first, and the rest would be donated. She said, it's better to leave it to Tang and Guo magistrates to do it. The emperor was stunned for a moment. After thinking about it, he looked at Bai Shan who was beside him, and asked with a smile, do you think so too? Bai Shan thought for a while and then said, it is the county magistrate's responsibility to provide relief to the disaster victims, and to settle the people, and it is the imperial court's action. The emperor sighed and said, but this time it's just a small disaster. This time the relief is given. Next time I encounter such a small disaster, if the court does not provide relief, it will only end up complaining more and more, and the relief is limited, the treasury is limited. Therefore, when it comes to minor disasters, although the imperial court will send officials to preside over them, they seldom help them. Instead, they will encourage big households in the county and township to help each other out, and everyone will help each other out. Only when the disaster is serious, the court will take action. Why did the emperor like to donate sesame oil money to Hyogyo Temple so much? Is it really all donated to Hyogyo Temple? It's just borrowing their hands, turning it around and giving it to the people. As for the part that was withheld by them, the emperor did not care. The monks also had to eat and drink. They suffered on behalf of all sentient beings, and they should serve. The emperor explained these truths to Man Bao. Man Bao didn't understand why they suffered on behalf of all sentient beings, and he didn't even understand the suffering of being a monk. Since it's so hard, why don't you be a Taoist priest? Man Bao was simply puzzled. I have friends who are Taoist priests, and they never feel bitter. Just like us, they have to work and recite sutras every day. I asked them if they felt bitter. One said that although there are times when they are short of food and clothing, but they do not starve to death, they always have more money than the average person to ask for sesame oil and burn incense. Another friend of mine said that there are more people in the world than them, and they all feel bitter. What about those who are more miserable than them? The emperor smiled and said, they can think about it. How old are they? 2 or 3 years older than me. The emperor was even more happy. This is because they haven't grown up yet, so they can't feel it. The Buddha said that the suffering of all living beings is the suffering of reincarnation. There are many poor people in this world. The Buddhists are willing to help them with food and property, and they are not so painful. However, the Buddhist family lacks things, and the cost of food and clothing is reduced. This is their suffering, so it is said that it is suffering on behalf of all sentient beings. Man Bao and Bai Shan looked confused, and they looked at each other, even more puzzled, but isn't what they get from the believers? It's not what they earned from their hard work. The emperor smiled and said, that is what we make offerings to the Bodhisattva. Since it is an offering, it is naturally his. Bai Shan asked, why do you make offerings to the Bodhisattva? Naturally, there is something to ask for: life, old age, sickness, and death. Zhongshan, Shiji, and the common people. The emperor wanted too much. The queen was seriously ill 2 years ago, so he donated a large sum of sesame oil to Hyogyo Temple in order to get the queen to recover. Later, the queen really got through the difficulties. Bai Shan and Man Bao were still puzzled, but they didn't know where to ask, so they could only whisper, Shaoqing Daoist said, if people are depressed, they will go up the mountain to worship Lord Tianzun, let go of their hearts, and maybe they will be lucky. Come on. But the gods and ghosts will not change their fates for mortals. Since they are mortals, they naturally have to survive on their own, so there is a limit to what gods and ghosts can help. They could only whisper, it always feels like they have come back after a round of good deeds. The emperor raised his eyelids and asked, you just say what you want to say out loud, why are you muttering? Man Bao cleared his throat and said, the Taoist priest Shaoqing never felt that it was hard to be a Taoist priest, but felt very comfortable. The believers donated money and materials to the Taoist temple because they believed in Lejun and needed him to pray on his behalf. The emperor thought about it and said, the same is true of Buddhism. See you at 4 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1725. So why is it so hard to worship one's own beliefs? Bai Shan said, I heard that the monks in Huguo Temple rent the Buddhist fields to the common people to cultivate, but they don't cultivate themselves, and they are monks, so they don't have to pay taxes. That is to say, everything they drink and peck is the offering of the believers, and whatever their own food and clothing reduce suffering, those things are not for them, but for the bodhisattvas behind them. The emperor was stunned for a moment, and said, aren't they the incarnation of the bodhisattva in this world? Then there are too many incarnations, is it not certain? Bai Shan asked, Your Majesty can't tell whether they are incarnations or not, then there are so many stupid people in this world, how can they distinguish them? If not incarnations, how does your Majesty know that they are doing the bodhisattva's decree? The emperor came back to his senses and looked at the two of them suspiciously, you don't like Buddha, but more like Tao. Bai Shan and Man Bao shook their heads together. Man Bao said, although I read a lot of Taoist scriptures, it's not that I don't read Buddhist scriptures. It is even more impossible for Bai Shan to admit it, otherwise it will become a dispute between Buddhism and Taoism, which is not his original intention. He said, Your Majesty, whether it is Buddhism or Taoism, they are the same as Confucianism, legalism, and Moism, but they are only fighting against the world. It is just a cognition of the reason why people are human. Ordinary people can make a family of words, such as Confucianism, although they read the words of 100 schools of thought, but they respect Confucianism more, but he believes more in legalism, while our husband is more inclined towards Taoism. But your Majesty is different. You are the leader of all people. The people of the world will only follow your beliefs. You believe in Buddhism, so Buddhist temples are flourishing, and Huguo Temple has become the largest temple in the world. This is not right. The emperor said angrily, I don't even have my own preferences for co-authoring until the end. Bai Shan knew that he would not do anything to him, so he said bluntly, who made you an emperor, and you still want to be a Ming Jun for the ages? If you want to gain something, you must give something. The emperor frowned. Man Bao looked puzzled, what's so difficult about this? Anyway, there are no gods and Buddhas in this world. If someone tells me that I want to be the number one doctor in the ages, I can't worship Tai's Hang Lejun with great fanfare. You must worship without knowing, Your Majesty. If you really like Bodhisattva, you can worship quietly in your own room. Crowd. The emperor asked angrily, how do you know that there are no gods and Buddhas in the world? Man Bao asked, even if there is, what can God and Buddha do for us? She said, the suffering in this world has never stopped. The road requires the common people to walk out 1 foot at a time. Gods and Buddhas cannot move forward on our behalf, so it makes no difference whether we have or not. As long as we do not forget the aspirations of our ancestors, we will can. Man Bao has seen the history books of that world from the encyclopedia. The development of history never depends on theology, but requires people to develop little by little. Either in the form of war, or in other forms of competition, no miracles have ever been seen. Bai Shan has read most of the books that Man Bao brought out of the space. He used to regard those books as bizarre stories, but the more he read, the more he thought about them. Sometimes he couldn't help but quietly ask Man Bao, why does the book that Uncle Joe brought us tells us not to believe in ghosts and gods? Man Bao was entangled, and Bai Shan found out the reason, because there are few ghosts and gods in the world, or because ghosts and gods can't actually affect mortals. Yes, Bai Shan said to himself, if ghosts and gods can affect our world, how could the king of Yazhu still be safe after he has harmed so many people, and we have to report to the imperial court to expose him before he can be punished. Moreover, he has grown so big, except for Josiashu, he has never seen a second ghost. Moreover, as such a powerful ghost, Uncle Joe seems to be unable to affect the third person other than talking to Man Bao, let alone him, even the rest of the old Joe family can't see or feel him. Therefore, Bai Shan's words at this time are still very confident. He hopes that the emperor can not show his likes and dislikes, and not pursue Buddhism. The emperor was not very happy, so he turned his head and said to the prince, "Did you hear that? As a king, don't have your own likes and dislikes. You don't have to go hunting. I heard people say that you still want the southern kingdom to bring you elephants." The crown prince suffered a disaster. He turned his head and glanced at Bai Shan and Zhou Man before saying, "I heard that the elephant soldiers of the Nanman are very powerful, so I want to see how majestic the elephant is and how it compares to 1,000 miles of horses." The emperor snorted. Said, "It costs a lot to get an elephant from Nanman to Beijing. How can you do such extravagant things as a prince, and you are not allowed to send someone there?" Zhao Qiuagong and others immediately opened the topic when they saw it. "Aren't we talking about disaster relief?" The emperor didn't want to go to Huguo Temple anymore, so he lost his temper and said, "Let the magistrates of Chang'an County and Wanyan County do it, let the state treasury, forget it, let's get it out of the private treasury, just take it as prey for the little prince. He is a little depressed now, and he doesn't want to see those ministers again for the time being." Zhao Qiuagong and Pai Qiuagong breathed a sigh of relief, and then expressed their willingness to follow His Majesty, and directly promised 900 stone grains to come out to pray for the little emperor's grandson. Naturally, they had to take an auspicious number. Seeing that the topic was pulled away, the prince quietly breathed a sigh of relief, and then glared at Bai Shan and Zhou Man secretly. Man Bao and Bai Shan felt that the two princes were really rich. The emperor felt the same way, so he exhaled and became happy again. After eating and drinking, the concubine had already carried the child back to the house. The prince sent his uncle and father-in-law's family out, and only then did he come back to send his father away. The emperor did not move, but asked the fifth prince to lead Mingda Changjiao to send the queen back to Taiji Hall first. Man Bao and Bai Shan, who were also left behind, stood in the corner with their little heads lowered, as if they had done something wrong. The emperor sat at the desk and wrote and drew. After writing a letter for his newborn grandson, he raised his eyes and looked at the two of them. He felt that they had enough to dry, so he put down his pen and said, "Come forward." The two stepped forward together. The emperor asked, "Do you know what's wrong?" Man Bao grabbed his fingers and said, "I know, we shouldn't mention these things at this time. Today, I'm going to wash up the third for the little emperor's grandson, which will spoil the fun." The emperor nodded slightly. Bai Shan added, "We shouldn't deny your majesty. Even if we give advice, we should talk about it privately afterwards, and we shouldn't tell your majesty in front of everyone." The emperor nodded slightly, satisfied, feeling that his face was enough. He turned his head and asked the prince who had returned after seeing the people, "I heard that there were no two people in your palace last night." The smile on the prince's face stopped, and then he lowered his head to report, "Yes, there are no two servants." He explained, "The night the crown princess launched, Zhou Man's needle bag was moved." The expression on the emperor's face was also put away, and he asked, "Have you found the mastermind behind the scenes?" "No." The emperor pondered for a moment and said, Let Yin Li investigate the matter. Jingzhou Mansion is better than you. See you at 9. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1726. The prince thought for a while and agreed. It is better to leave it to Yin Li than to the Ministry of Punishment and Dali Temple. When the emperor saw his answer, he gave him the written word, find someone to frame it, and when the child is sensible, tell him that it was written by his grandfather specially for him. The prince glanced at it and found that it was written with blessings, so he happily accepted it. The emperor got up and left. Manbao and Bai Shan wanted to stay and inquire about Suyu, but the emperor waved at the two of them, and the two of them could only go out together. After leaving the East Palace, the emperor did not get on the imperial carriage, and walked directly to let them follow. Manbao looked back at the gate of the East Palace and followed silently. The emperor said to them, I worship the Bodhisattva because the Bodhisattva really saved the empress. You are more inclined to the old gentleman. Did you have any miracles? No. Manbao knew about his own family. Regarding her mother's words that she was the reincarnation of a little fairy, she could just listen to it and secretly have fun in her heart. There was no real evidence. Manbao said, but your majesty, how can you know that it was saved by the Bodhisattva, or that the medicines of the imperial physicians were effective? Or is it that God has been granted permission by the goddess's kindness and kindness? She said, I think, during that time, His Majesty must have done more than just praying to Buddha, right? The emperor pondered, and was about to walk to the Taiji hall. He recovered from his contemplation. He sighed and said, when I was young, I didn't believe in gods and Buddhas, but the older I get, the more I find out. Some things are beyond the reach of manpower, even if I am rich in the world and the king of a country, I cannot do it. Manbao and Bai Shan were silent, secretly thinking in their hearts, if everything in this world can be done by human beings, wouldn't it be a matter of words for them to fly and become immortals? They have learned from a young age that there are many things in this world that humans cannot do. The emperor sighed and waved, okay, you all go back. The two stopped and watched as the emperor walked into the Taiji hall with Gu Zhong and a large group of guards and maids. The two of them looked back at the way they came. Yes, it took a long time to go back to the East Palace. Really, why do adults have to walk and think about things when they think about things, and can't sit and think about them? It's fine to stand in one place and think. The two looked at each other and walked back resignedly. And the emperor who talked to them was in a much better mood. This kind of belief in ghosts and gods could not be told to the queen, because whether the queen believed it or not, she would persuade him not to believe it. Let alone tell the ministers that if he dares to talk about this on the front foot, he can ask the ministers to impeach him on the back foot. There are many ministers in the DPRK who do not believe in gods and Buddhas. Although the emperor did not mind being impeached, it would still be uncomfortable to be remonstrated. He told Zhou Man and Bai Shan that although the other party also expressed disapproval, the other party would not force him to accept their point of view, so it felt good to talk. Manbao and Bai Shan, who went to the East Palace along the palace road, were not very happy at first, and it took a lot of time to walk so much in vain. But after walking for a while, seeing the snow swept and piled up on both sides of the road, Manbao couldn't help but stretch out his feet and step on it. The snow was very thick, so she directly covered her boots. She lifted it up and stepped forward, and when she heard the crunching sound of the snow, she couldn't help but jumped up and stepped on it hard. Shan smiled and said, listen, listen well. Bai Shan looked back and forth, and when he saw no one, he stretched out his foot to step on it. The two of them didn't walk on the road. They stepped on the snow on both sides and ran back, crunching along the way, and couldn't help laughing out loud. Sound. The palace is quiet, even the slightest sound will travel far, not to mention the frolic of the two. When the guards on patrol heard the sound, they turned around to check, and only turned a corner. From a distance, they could not see clearly and shouted, "Which palace are you from?" I thought they were palace maids and servants. The two couldn't help but look back, immediately jumped out of the snowy road, and ran away holding hands. One of the guards was about to chase when he saw that he was pulling his leg, but was pulled by the one with a good look. "Okay, didn't you see that the man was wearing Kongwengan clothes? That woman is not a palace maid, so what are you chasing?" "It's not a palace maid, could it be? Concubine." "What are you thinking?" The leading guard gave him a head and said, looking at the size, "It should be the imperial physician Joe of the imperial hospital." "Then, is it also a private exchange in the palace?" "Everyone has run away, and Imperial Dr. Zhou and Bai Shan from Chongquen Pavilion are fiancés. When we patrolled just now, we saw them walking behind His Majesty." "Who are you going to sue them for a private exchange?" Also, the guards had to stop chasing. If they wanted to chase, they couldn't catch up. Man Bao and Bai Shan had already run away without a trace. The two of them held hands and ran back to the East Palace in a hurry. After entering the gate of the East Palace, they couldn't help panting on their knees. The guards guarding the gate of the East Palace. Didn't these two follow His Majesty? This, they want to ask but dare not ask. Man Bao breathed for a while before he recovered, and then supported Bai Shan's hand and walked back. The two returned to Chongquen Museum, because they had already eaten at the prince's place, so they were not hungry. The two separated and went back to their respective rooms to sleep. Su Yu was arrested, and Man Bao thought she had no maid for the time being. As a result, just after she returned to the house, a palace maid came tremblingly to greet her, indicating that she was temporarily dispatched. Seeing that she seemed to be a little afraid of her, Man Bao nodded and said, "Okay, I understand, you can just fill me a basin of warm water." The little palace maid responded, took the wooden basin, bowed and walked out. Man Bao probably guessed that she was afraid of her because of Su Yu, so he sighed and didn't ask anything. He took off his shoes and washed his face and hands before lying on the bed. She decided to take a nap first, and talk about everything after the nap. When she entered the palace today, she got up very early. Man Bao yawned and lay down, and when he woke up again, it was too late. She quickly got up and put on her clothes and shoes before heading to the library, but when she got out of the yard, she saw Magistrate Tang, who was standing under a tree opposite the gate of their yard, watching the snow with his hands behind his back. Man Bao paused for a while, thinking of something, and went up to greet him. "Your Majesty asked Lord Yin to investigate the matter of the East Palace. Lord Yin has handed over the matter to Senior Brother Tang." Magistrate Tang retracted his gaze and nodded with a smile. "Smart, you are quite leisurely, but I have been waiting for you for a while. Come on, let's find a place to talk." What was replaced was Man Bao's needle bag. No matter who came to check, he would definitely ask Man Bao to ask questions. She was already prepared, looked around and said, "Let's go to the observation tower." County Magistrate Tang nodded, and before leaving, he pulled a handful of branches based on his height. The branches that were bent by the snow trembled for a while, and then the snow rustled down. Man Bao walked slower and was sprinkled half of his head. Good night. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1727. She complained and looked at Magistrate Tang. The county magistrate Tang smiled and said, "Did you see it? Swallow has marks, and this crime is the same, so you can think about it carefully. Apart from the replacement of the needle bag, what other unusual things have you encountered?" "Son." Man Bao said, "Does the snow that you spilled on your head count?" "Forget it," Tang County Magistrate said with a smile, "I'm reminding you, this kind of reminder is not normal, so it's natural." Although Man Bao was a little unconvinced and hummed twice, she still began to think back seriously. She said, "Actually, my needle bag was touched once before, but the other party didn't change my needle that time. I didn't add anything. It seems that I just opened my needle bag and looked at it, and then sealed it back intact." Tang County Magistrate said, "3 people brought your medicine box together that day, but I heard from the prince that you only doubt Suyu. Why is this?" After thinking about it, Man Bao said, "I feel." Magistrate Tang smiled and asked, "Apart from feeling, is there any other evidence?" Man Bao shook his head, "No." The Magistrate Tang felt a little regretful. "It's the first time you've been passively used for a needle bag. Is there anything unusual about her?" No. Seeing Magistrate Tang looking at her, Man Bao said, "It's true, she hasn't changed a bit, and she's not nervous when she speaks. Even when she was carrying her and everyone behind her back, she was the same as usual. Nothing has changed." Magistrate Tang was very curious. "Then why do you doubt her?" He raised his hand slightly to stop what she was about to say, and said, "Even if it is a feeling, there should be some basis for actions or words. Don't worry, no matter what you say, I will not laugh at you." "I think she is staring at me quietly," Man Bao said. "When I first came to the palace, she would quietly walk to a place not far from my window in the middle of the night and stand listening to the news." Magistrate Tang was curious, "Did you see it?" Keek saw it, but when Keek saw it, it was like she saw it, so she nodded. Magistrate Tang asked with a smile, "Did you get up to check when you heard the movement? Did she know you found her?" "She does not know." Magistrate Tang didn't believe it. Did she really not know, or did she pretend she didn't know? "Really do not know. She was lying in bed obediently pretending to be asleep, or was taking a class in the classroom, and she didn't really get up to see her. How would she know?" Magistrate Tang nodded. "So you still doubt Suyu?" Man Bao nodded, "But there is no evidence." "You said that you need evidence to handle a case." "That's right," Tang County Magistrate said. "Suyu entered the Department of Penalties. She said she was wronged and didn't know anything, and the 2 servants who brought you the medicine box with her that day both died. One committed suicide and the other committed suicide. It's because they couldn't bear the punishment and confessed that the 2 of them quietly replaced your needles, but unfortunately the punishment was severed before the person behind the scenes could be recruited." Man Bao opened his mouth in surprise. "Yes, is it them?" Tang County Magistrate said, "He said that the 2 of them took Suyu to go out to find you first, and the other excused him to stay and wait for you, so that you would not go back to the yard and go empty, and then secretly changed the 3rd and 4th needles in the needle bag while no one was in the yard. 6, 7, 8, 9 needles. Or Suyu felt that it was too time-consuming to find you in the middle of the journey, and then turned around and said to bring your medicine box with him. After finding you, you can go to see the crown princess." The inner servant who confessed and Suyu's the narrative is correct. Man Bao opened his mouth wide and frowned after a while. "Isn't it Suyu?" Tang County Magistrate said, "Because you said you suspected Suyu, he was the first to be arrested. The 2 servants were only questioned, but yesterday evening, one of the servants committed suicide by throwing himself into the well. Eunuch Wu wanted to ask him when he was questioning again. It's a bit strange that there are no talents, so another servant was arrested." Man Bao was speechless in shock. Magistrate Tang separated a table from her, leaned slightly and stared into her eyes. "Apart from these, what doubts does Suyu have?" Man Bao was silent for a long time and then said, "Is it normal?" Tang County Magistrate raised his eyebrows. Man Bao frowned and said, "I think I can guess what she will say and do next, and then she really said those words and did those things. Just follow, just follow. Just like Keek, who was stared at by the main system. Coco only does that when the main system is staring at it, and occasionally, it doesn't talk to her as programmed. In this world, there is no non-biological like Keek, How could she be more like Keek than Keek? But she couldn't say these words to Magistrate Tang, she could only look at the other party, hoping that the other party would understand what she meant when she couldn't give an example. The Magistrate Tang smiled and said, "It's like a shadow play with a storybook written down." When Man Bao heard this, he nodded again and again, "That's right, that's it." The Magistrate Tang stood up and said, "Okay, I understand." He turned to leave, suddenly thought of something, and turned around and asked, "After your needle bag was passive for the first time, you didn't think about checking it?" "I checked. Bai Shan and I asked someone to check Suyu's experience after entering the palace, and also checked her family," Man Bao said, "but Bai Shan and I can check it out. If Shuexiang Tang wants to check these things, it should be checked. Isn't it difficult? After all, most of them are records on the dossier." The Magistrate Tang smiled and said, "It's not difficult." No further questions were asked about what they had found. Man Bao watched him go downstairs and walked away, then propped his chin against the railing to start a daze. "Isn't it Suyu? Wasn't she wronged?" Just as he was doubting himself, Man Bao heard a loud shout, "Zhou Man!" Man Bao was startled, looked down, and saw Xiao Yuan standing downstairs with round eyes looking at her angrily. "The hospital is so busy that your feet don't touch the ground, what are you doing here?" Man Bao asked innocently, "What's wrong? What's the matter? You're still asking what's wrong? You don't know that when the school starts tomorrow, the students are going to go to the imperial physician's office?" When Man Bao heard this, he remembered this, and immediately flew downstairs to get busy. Xiao Yuanzhang grabbed her and said, "For a while, you don't need to go to the imperial palace in the morning. The little emperor is indeed important, but why don't you go to the imperial hospital afternoon? Do you know that everyone is so busy even for lunch? I didn't even take 2 sips, I didn't drink water." Man Bao repeatedly admitted his mistakes, and followed Xiao Yuanzheng to the Shangsha bureau first. "The remaining 2 volumes have already been engraved and printed, you have to check with Imperial Dr. Lu for any mistakes. These 2 volumes have been printed together, if there are any, circle them, and the Shangsha bureau should come over immediately." He said, "The time is too fast, so you have to go faster. The students will be admitted tomorrow, and we will send the book the day after, the next day at the latest." Man Bao can only respond. Then Xiao Yuanzheng said again, "The crown princess has already given birth, you don't need to go there anymore, and Prince Gong's side is just to lose weight, eat less and move more. Even a pig can lose weight, I think he is pretty good now, don't go there to be lazy. The most important thing now is the imperial physician's office, do you know?" "Wrong, wrong, this is good night." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1728. Man Bao nodded again and again. Xiao Yuanzheng continued to talk, "It is still your opinion that the imperial physician's office is opened. You can't just let it go after you get the benefits. Look at my hair, how many gray hairs have I added in the past 6 months? Also, I am the boss, you are subordinate, don't always ask me to work with you, do you have to take the initiative to know?" Man Bao nodded again and couldn't help but ask, "Xiao Yuanzheng, did you eat duck bills at noon today?" Xiao Yuanzheng said angrily, "No, I have eaten duck feet, or do you think I can walk so fast now? Hurry up and work for me." Man Bao took the medical book she was assigned and ran away. After handing over the task, Xiao Yuanzheng breathed a sigh of relief. He still trusted Zhou Man's work efficiency. Man Bao took the book back to the library and began to check it. At this time, the Tang County magistrate was walking to the Department of Prudence and Punishment. As soon as he arrived in the torture room, he smelled a bloody smell. Eunuch Wu, who was listening to the questioning, sneered and said to Suyu, who was tied to the shelf, "Suyu, if Imperial Physician Zhou hadn't interceded for you, you would not have survived this punishment. Don't be ashamed, if you don't confess, our family won't stop them from punishing them. Suyu lowered his head and said in a hoarse voice after a while, "Slave, this slave is wronged, and this slave really doesn't know anything." Eunuch Wu saw that she didn't have enough oil and salt, so he said to the left and right, "Forget it, let's get a big sentence." Suyu lifted her eyelids slightly and saw them coming up with a blood-stained wooden flail. She couldn't help shaking her whole body, her hands trembled convulsively, and finally she lowered her head. The county magistrate Tang also saw the wooden shackles. The wooden shackles were caught in the chest. He frowned slightly. With this punishment, it is estimated that people really can't survive. People are dead, whether they are true suspects or true innocents. He turned the corner to stop him. Eunuch Wu saw the magistrate Tang, and only bent down slightly and said, "Master Tang, Your Highness asked me to follow the instructions to the left of Master Yin. I didn't expect you to come. If you have any orders, just tell our family to do it." The magistrate Tang smiled slightly and said, "I have worked for Eunuch Wu. I have something to ask Suyu, can this wooden shackle be used again later?" He said casually, "I just came from Imperial Dr. Zhou." "Why?" she asked the public servant to take care of Suyu. Eunuch Wu frowned and said, "Tianyi Zhou had a good heart and begged for mercy with His Highness, but His Highness did nothing and said that she would save her life. But our family sees her stubbornness and she is obviously unable to shed tears without seeing the coffin." The magistrate Tang nodded his head to show his understanding, and then said, "Why don't I ask? Maybe I can ask something. After all, she is the one who serves Zhou Tai, and she has 2 points of incense, and she is really killed. Not good." Eunuch Wu thought about it for a while, and thought so, and after talking for a while, his anger subsided a little, so he waved people down. Magistrate Tang stepped forward, walked around Suyu, waved his hand and asked someone to bring a glass of water, and asked him to feed her a sip of water before staring at her face and asking, "The needle of Imperial Physician Zhou, did you change the bag?" Suyu couldn't even shake his head, but said in a weak voice, "No, this servant doesn't know about the needle bag. But the 2 chamberlains who accompanied you to the medicine box said that it was you who changed it." Suyu burst into tears. "They lied, the slaves were wronged. Why did the slaves do such a thing?" The magistrate Tang smiled and said, "You asked me the other way around. I should have asked you this. Why did you do such a thing?" Suyu shook his head with difficulty, and after denying it, he stopped talking. Magistrate Tang asked, "Someone saw you standing outside the window of Imperial Dr. Zhou staring at her more than once in the middle of the night. You were assigned to Imperial Dr. Zhou from the very beginning? Who was the one who ordered you?" Suyu was stunned for a moment and then said, "The servant just got up to check if Imperial Dr. Zhou had any other orders." She said, "The servants served Zhou Tai. Originally, the maids served the female officials with them. Sleeping on the feet of the female officials and listening to orders was a common occurrence. It's just that Tai Zhou was considerate to servants and reciprocated. The servants will naturally be more dedicated." If Zhou Man hadn't said this, Magistrate Tang might have believed her 3 points, but at the moment she didn't have 1 point. Some behaviors may indeed be misunderstood, but Zhou Man, as a party, is sensitive and intelligent. He can be sure that she must have sensed something when she can say that. And people must have feelings for danger and dislike. The expression on Tang County Magistrate's face didn't change much. He asked, "How many times have you done this?" Suyu said, "I don't remember, but when Imperial Physician Zhou first entered the palace, I got up almost every night to check on the situation." She paused and said, "The slave servants are indeed selfish. Everyone knows why the Imperial Dr. Zhou lives in the palace. She is for the prince and the prince. As long as she can keep the prince and the prince, not only in the crown prince and the crown princess have a lot of respect for His Majesty and the Empress. The slave girl just wants to do her best and form a good relationship with Zhou Tai. If she can say a word for the slave servant in the future, the slave servant may also be promoted to a female official. Suyu seemed to be in a better spirit. She raised her head and looked at Tang. The county magistrate shook his head slightly excitedly and said, although this servant has selfish intentions, she never thought of harming Imperial Physician Zhou. Really, Tang magistrate didn't know whether to believe it or not, and he changed his voice. Tell me about the situation that day. When did you meet the imperial concubine Xian Zhou's inner servant? What were you doing at that time? Anyone? Suyu had already answered these questions before, but at this time, he just answered them again, but the county magistrate Tang asked the process once, and then changed the order of the questions and asked them again. The magistrate Tang asked these questions back and forth 7 or 8 times. In the end, Suyu's answer was weak. She was tied up and had injuries on her body. It was already very painful. She almost collapsed. Not to mention her, even Eunuch Wu, who was listening on the side, was about to collapse. The magistrate Tang asked again, where was the medicine box of Imperial Physician Zhou in the house at that time? Suyu replied groggily, on a shelf in the bookshelf. Suyu's body trembled lightly. This question had never come up before. She knew that she had said the wrong thing, so she could only keep her face expressionless, and added weakly, the medicine box of Zhou Imperial Doctor is usually placed in that place. Tang County Magistrate interrupted her and asked, did you and that servant named Wang Yu go out to find Zhou Tai all along the same way? These questions have already been asked. Suyu answered again in great pain. Magistrate Tang asked these questions back and forth again and again. Every time she answered the same question, the hyphenation did not increase or decrease much. After she became groggy again, Magistrate Tang asked again, who is in the hands of the medicine box when you leave the yard? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1729. My. Suyu lowered her head, her hair covered her expression, and her voice barely fluctuated. When Wang Yu and I went back to the yard, I saw Yang Shan carrying Zhou Imperial Physician's medicine box. I reached out and took it. Really, but what you said at the beginning was that you only took the medicine box from Liang Shan after you left the yard. Suyu said, no slaves never said so. The magistrate Tang smiled, closed the booklet recorded by Eunuch Wu and the others, and waved his hand. I'm done asking. Eunuch will send her back to the cell. When Eunuch Wu heard this, he leaned over curiously and asked, why, does your lord have a clue? The magistrate Tang smiled and said, although I'm not very sure, but I'm pretty sure. Suyu, do you know what it means to be clever but be mistaken by cleverness? You have failed the Imperial Dr. Zhou's request for you, but the prince has for the joy of adding ding, if you are willing to confess to the people behind the scenes, there is no chance that you will survive. Suyu said softly, this slave is wronged. The magistrate Tang smiled and said, there is nothing that the Jingzhou house wants to investigate. So far, have you forgotten why Prince Gong is under house arrest in the palace at this time? You want to die to protect some people, it also depends on whether you can really protect them. The emperor's anger is not ordinary anger, Suyu, the dead in this palace are too ordinary. Suyu lowered his head and stopped talking. The magistrate Tang waved his hand, and Eunuch Wu asked her to be dragged down. Eunuch Wu waited for her to walk away and asked, Master Tang, there is no need for punishment. Tang County Magistrate said, it's been beaten like this and still doesn't speak, it's meaningless to fight again, it's just an extra life for nothing. Eunuch Wu said coldly, it's not a pity for such a person to die. Tang County Magistrate said, death is not a pity, but the dead must have meaning. If she died in torture, she died in vain. If she died on the execution ground, she deserved what she deserved. His purpose is to find out the truth, not to kill. However, Eunuch Wu wanted to clean up all the spies in the East Palace, especially those spies who were unfavorable to the Crown Prince, the Crown Princess and the little Emperor's grandson, and should be killed as an example. It's a pity that the prince said to save her life, and the magistrate Tang did not agree with the punishment, so Eunuch Wu could only resign with regret. The two walked out of the somewhat gloomy Department of Prudence and Punishment. Magistrate Tang took out a handkerchief and wiped his hands, then folded the handkerchief and stuffed it into his sleeves. Eunuch Wu couldn't help but ask, what will Master Tang plan to investigate next? Check the people who are close to Su Yu in the Chongquen Museum, and check her family. I have to go to the Imperial Hospital. Tang County Magistrate said with a smile, I also ask Wu Gonggong to tell His Royal Highness, the subordinate will definitely investigate the case with all his heart. Eunuch Wu smiled and said, Your Highness naturally trusts Master Tang when he does things. Master Tang smiled, turned around and went to the Imperial Hospital. Seeing Zhou Man was not there, he asked curiously, does the Imperial physician Zhou usually work in the Imperial Hospital? Zheng Tai explained, Zhou Tai's main responsibility is to repair books, so most of the time he stays in Chongquen Hall. In fact, before the great court battle against Wang Ji and others, these imperial physicians often worked in the Chongquen Museum. Not only did they have a lot of books, they were easy to find information, and they also had a lot of pen, ink, and paper, which they could use as they pleased. Don't think it's just simple pen, ink, and paper, these bits and pieces are also very expensive, especially recently they have done a lot of materials and wrote a lot of books, and the paper is very large. But they have all moved here now. Although they feel sorry, no one dared to say it in front of Xiao Yuan Zheng. The magistrate Tang nodded and asked, Your Highness sent the needle bag of Zhou Taiji to the Tai Hospital, did you find the poison on it? You have to ask Imperial Physician Liu. This is the responsibility of Imperial Physician Liu. The magistrate Tang turned to look for Imperial Physician Liu, and finally saw Imperial Physician Liu in a small room. He and Physician Wan were getting together, holding a needle in his hand and carefully calcining it on the candle. A medicinal smell came out. Imperial Physician Liu approached and said softly, Do you smell it? Is this musk? It's musk, Dr. Wan frowned, this is really cruel, even dare to use musk to soak the needle. Physician Liu soaked the red-hot needle in a small saucer of water, and after it had cooled down completely, put the small saucer of water in the middle. 200-year-old old people lay on the table and dipped a little water on their tongues with one finger each, and tasted it. And Angelica and San Leng. Wan Tai added, there is also Shen Nanxing. Magistrate Tang did not step forward immediately, but just stood at the door and watched. The two wrote the name of the medicine they had identified on the paper, and said with a headache, it took 2 days to find the 6 herbs. I think there must be more than that. Imperial Physician Liu said, the rest are hard to find. I have used all the methods, so I can only ask the person who soaked the medicine, but these herbs are enough, they are all herbs for promoting blood circulation and removing blood stasis, and promoting water and purging. If such a medicine is given to a full-term pregnant woman, not only is the mother in critical condition, but even if the child is born, it may be useless. Newborns are very easy to die in the first place. Children who take this kind of medicine have a high probability of not surviving the third. Even if they do survive, I am afraid it is not a fool, or yin, or that kind of body. This method is too sinister. Both Lu Tai and Wan Tai are good at pediatrics and women's diseases, so they are a little angry. Seeing that they didn't speak for a while, the Tang County magistrate went into the house. Imperial Physician Liu and Imperial Physician Wan hurriedly stood up and saluted, and then showed him the written prescription, saying that they could not distinguish the rest of the medicine. If the magistrate Tang wanted to investigate further, he had to hire another brilliant. Of course, the 2 imperial doctors in the imperial hospital who were most familiar with this type of medicine could not find it, and it is estimated that they would not be able to find out if they were to find other people. The magistrate Tang asked, according to the two imperial physicians, was this needle soaked in the palace or outside the palace? Physician Lu and Physician Wan looked at each other and said, even if it is soaked, the medicine has to be boiled first. If you boil the medicine, it will smell like medicine. Ordinarily, they would not dare to boil such medicine in the palace. Dr. Wan said, but if you prepare it outside, it's not right to just send the needle into the palace. This needle is not effective after soaking. If you want to pierce the needle, the medicinal energy will penetrate into the bone, then the needle must be soaked for at least 3 days. But also to change the medicine. Besides, the needle should be used within 12 hours after drying, otherwise, after 12 hours, the medicinal gas will fade and the effect will be weakened, he said. This needle was delivered to us. When I have it in my hands, I smell it carefully, and the smell of medicine is stronger after roasting, but today we changed a needle and roasted it again, and the smell of medicine will be lighter. The magistrate Tang understood, so it should take no more than 6 hours for the needle to appear in the needle bag of Imperial Dr. Zhou from drying. See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1730. Imperial Physician Lu said, it should be shorter, because the crown princess is the first child. Even if it starts, it will still take a lot of time before delivery. In order to ensure the better effect of this injection, they must shorten this time. But the strange thing is that even our imperial doctor can't tell when the princess will activate it. Lu Imperial Doctor said, we can only roughly calculate an extra episode. Anyway, about 10 days before and after, I remember that week that day. The imperial doctor visited the imperial concubine. After visiting the imperial concubine, and Xiao Yuan Zheng asked about the concubine's birth date, and the imperial physician Zhou said at the time, it might be within 3 or 5 days. That evening, the princess felt that she was going to give birth. It was the imperial Dr. Zhou who suddenly called for it. How did those people rush so coincidentally that they had just dried poison needles to replace them? Magistrate Tang squinted his eyes and asked, isn't there a place in this palace where you can boil the medicine without making people suspicious? No. Imperial physician Lu secretly tightened his back and said alertly, for medicine in the palace, except for the prepared pills, other medicines must be taken from the imperial hospital, and medicines like musk are used in the palace. It is very strict to use it, let alone a month or 2, that is, no one has used it within a year. Dr. Wan also said, there are His Majesty and the Empress, as well as several princes and princesses in the palace, and epidemic prevention has always been strict. It will be taken out of our imperial hospital. The magistrate Tang said with a smile, of course I can trust the 2 imperial physicians, but I still want to see the medication records of the imperial hospital during this period. Physician Lu and Physician Wan looked at each other and said after a response, Master Tang can write a handwritten letter, and we will give it to you after we approve it to the hospital. Dr. Wan asked, how long do you want the records? Magistrate Tang thought for a while and said, it will be within 2 months. Imperial Physician Lu responded and wrote it down. While the Tang County magistrate was busy with this, the deputy assigned to him by Yin Li had already called all the servants and maids in the Changguan Pavilion to the observation tower. No way, it's the most spacious place at the moment, and no one is there. As soon as he arrived at the place, his subordinates stepped forward to report, Sir, we don't have a lot of time. We have to go out before the palace gate is locked. Tang County magistrate asked, did you go to invite Lord Yang? Please, Mr. Yang is questioning inside. Tang magistrate went in with a smile on his face. Inside, the maid were standing on 2 sides. Yang Heshu was holding a pen and paper and asking questions. It was actually very easy. It was to ask who had a better relationship with Suyu and walked closer on weekdays. Because everyone in the Changguan Museum is here, Yang Heshu said, if you don't take the initiative to say, there are many other people in this room. It's not good for others to talk about such a thing. As soon as these words came out, everyone was apprehensive, so they didn't dare to hide it, and they all said that they had a good relationship with Suyu, and they couldn't see anything on weekdays. Of course, this is what everyone asked when they were together. In addition, they would call to the side one by one to ask questions. As soon as the county magistrate came in, Mr. Yang slapped the list written in his hand in his arms and said, "This is someone who has an intersection with her, and the others don't work in the same area, so they don't know each other well. Suyu's impression is average." Magistrate Tang glanced at the circle on the list and was surprised, so many people. Master Yang said, "I checked her secretly once before, and that time I didn't see anything wrong, but this time I asked someone directly to find out that she has a good relationship with everyone she knows." Tang County Magistrate frowned. How can such a person be 18 and just do odd jobs in the Chongquen Museum? Actually, it's much better than doing chores. Master Yang knew that he was not familiar with the palace, so he glanced at him and said, "Don't look at the fact that she is only assigned to the Chongquen Pavilion to serve people in the palace now." Female officer. Before he came, Mr. Yang had already inquired, and he said, Man Bao was specially recruited by the prince to prepare for the princess, so he told him to take good care of people. After Eunuch Wu and Yeting Palace said hello, Yeting Palace has carefully selected 3 people for the East Palace to choose. Yang Hesha said, Suyu is one of them. In the end, Eunuch Wu personally chose Suyu. Tang Magistrate raised his eyebrows and asked, "Why?" I asked Eunuch Wu. Eunuch Wu said, "Because Suyu's conditions are the most suitable, because he is innocent, attentive, and considerate, and his age is also suitable. She has never fought or won, and the other 2 have a stronger personality than her." Yang Hesha said, "Man Bao is young and has a simple personality. The East Palace should be afraid that a strong personality will treat her poorly or affect her." Tang County Magistrate understood, so this person was carefully selected by the East Palace. If she has no problem, she will pay it back. If there is a problem, the people behind it have thought deeply enough. Tang County Magistrate flicked the paper in his hand and said with a smile, "If that's the case, let's check them one by one." So, the 2 of them went into the room to ask questions one by one according to the names on the list. Tang County Magistrate packed all the records and gave them to his subordinates to take them out of the palace, and then asked Yang Hesha to leave the palace. Yang Hesha glanced at him, and they were about to lock up. Even if he didn't make an appointment, the 2 of them would also leave the palace. What else is there to make an appointment with? The magistrate Tang walked out while rubbing his neck and sighed, "Tomorrow, I have to go to the Thai hospital to retrieve the medicine records." This time, 5 houses collapsed in Chang'an County during the heavy snowfall, and many houses were damaged. Your Majesty and Zhao Kuogong Pai Duke Guo also threw a bunch of food into the county office, so I still have to find time to check the disaster situation. Sai, when this matter is over, I must ask Zhou Man to give me a few needles too. Yang Hesha then asked, Master Yin doesn't care about anything. He will wait until I find out what to look for. Now it's all about running errands, so he doesn't do it. Tang County Magistrate thought of something and laughed. Today, when I entered the palace, I saw Lao Guo next door. I just came to receive the order, and when I heard that Lord Yin handed over this case in the East Palace to me, his face turned blue. Yang Hesha smiled and shook his head. What are you comparing to him at this time? Magistrate Tang sighed. Isn't this a joy in suffering? He thought I was happy to take care of this kind of thing. He was silent for a while and then said, this time Suyu is buried so deeply, the main reason is that the people behind the scenes are so accurate. I am afraid that the energy is still higher than Prince Gong. You said that in this palace, the Majesty, the Queen, and the Prince, who else is stronger than Prince Gong? Yang Hesha did not speak. But both of them had guesses in their hearts. Good night.